What can stop connection? Whether you're dating or you are already in an established relationship. Hello, welcome to this episode of How to Love Successfully with me, Dr. Mari Kovanen. I'm a registered psychologist and a conscious dating coach for strong female leaders. You have everything going on at work. You've established yourself. But one part of your life is not exactly where you want it to be. You want to be able to share your amazing life with someone. Have someone you're really looking forward to meeting and seeing. Have someone who supports you, encourages you. You are looking for that committed long-term relationship. Today again, we are revisiting another wonderful interview that we had earlier in this year. The podcast is on its well-earned recording break, and we will be recording in November again. But now we are revisiting the most downloaded episodes. Today we are talking to clinical psychologist and coach Michaela Thomas, the founder of the Thomas Connection. She wears many hats. She's written a book about connection. She is a really great guest to learn from more about how to improve connection. Today we are talking about perfectionism and how that can stop you from connecting, or whether you are dating and looking for love, or whether you are already in an established relationship. We'll talk about her own experiences of dating as a high achieving woman, and she will talk about what she's learned in her work with high striving men and women, with couples, individuals, and how we can all feel more connected in our relationships. You will definitely get something out of this interview. But before we go into the interview, I would like to share with you this amazing opportunity that I have a few times in the month. I have some slots available for 30-minute free dating clinic consultation, where you can come and talk about your dating situation, and we can think about what is your best strategy going forward, how to get you unstuck, how to have your first date. And you can book those consultations via the link in the show notes. But let's now go into the interview, and I hope that you enjoy it. Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Love Successfully. And this time I have a very exciting and interesting conversation coming up with my colleague, Michaela Thomas. So I'm really excited about this. So welcome, Michaela.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
And let me tell you a little bit about Michaela. So she is a clinical psychologist, a couples therapist, and founder of the private practice, the Thomas Connection. Michaela specialises in perfectionism and has authored the book, The Lasting Connection, Develop Love and Compassion for Yourself. And she also offers coaching for high-striving women. And Michaela can be found on her Pause, Purpose, Play podcast and on Instagram under @the Thomas Connection. Of course, the compassionate couple has been described as life-changing. Amazing to have this conversation. And we, of course, have a bit of a history together because we've done last year I interviewed for my summit, and we've known each other in the online psychology space for a while. So this is amazing just to connect with you really again and have these conversations, because we share so many similar interests. So really looking forward to talking about love, relationships, and perfectionism today.
Really excited. I think we're going to have a lot of conversation about connection and compassion and how that relates to love.
Absolutely. So if we start really to get to know you a little bit and how you got interest in specializing in relationships, and it's interesting to know, how did you meet your husband, and how did all of that happen for you? Because our audience really consists of a lot of women who are trying to find that significant person in their life. And it's always interesting to hear really how someone else has done that and met their person.
It's tricky, really, because when you're newly seeing someone, how are you going to know that is the person? And obviously, I don't believe that there is only one person for us. I think that there are many connections we can have in our lives. But this connection that I made with this person, who then became to be my husband, was special. I think that it's who we meet for a reason or a season is also shaped by what we've met before. We met this person. When we came together, when I met this person who became my husband, I had been in the UK for a couple of years. I moved to the UK from Sweden to be with someone who it didn't work out with. We'd done long distance for a long time. And sometimes when you have long distance, then moving in together, then that sort of shows up some of the vulnerabilities or difficulties that there were in the relationship that weren't visible at long distance. So it came to naturally, it didn't work out. But 4 months after that sort of finally ended, I met this person. So I was quite fresh out of that long-term relationship. I was thinking a lot about, what do I want? What do I need? What do I want life to look like? And one big reason for moving away from the relationship I'd come to the UK was that I pictured myself as being potentially alone in a relationship. This person was working very long hours. And I thought, if I have a child in this kind of setting, I would be raising that child on my own. And I wasn't prepared to be alone in a relationship with another person. So it wasn't the right thing for me, my values. Connection is a big key value for me. As you can hear from my brand, my company name is The Thomas Connection, and my book is The Lasting Connection. Connection really matters to me. And then I met this person. We were introduced, a friend of a friend, and we just had this instant connection. He listened, he validated me. I was given all the emotional connection, all the emotional attention that I hadn't been given. And I just felt that this was clicking on so many levels. We were having deep conversations. I felt like I could be vulnerable. I felt like it could be real. I could talk about things that shaped me, rather than just having to have this like positive vibes only feeling. I could talk about everything, life, and like light and dark in equal measure. And that is something that's very important to me as a psychologist. Obviously, you and I both know that we sit with lots of light and dark in life when we are psychologists. And I needed someone who could hold space for that, who could understand and respect that mattered to me. So I have early memories of us just sitting in moments where we lost track of time. We were just talking and connecting, and I could feel like I could be myself. And for someone who specializes in perfectionism, and knowing the research around connection, that when we are authentic, when we are vulnerable, showing our softer sides to us, the things we may be worried about other people seeing, that then deepens connection. So you go out on a limb, you take a risk, you show a part of you that you're not sure that the other person necessarily going to resonate with. And then when they do, that feeds connection. So already, for anyone listening thinking, but how do I dare to be real about who I am? And you're starting to meet someone, and like you really want to make sure that you're pleasing them, or they're liking you, and you give this image of who, of you are really presentable. The more you focus on playing a game of holding up a facade and an imagery that isn't you, the other way you move from connection. It's not going to last.
Absolutely. That is so amazing. And I really love that you described it, that it's not the kind of like many people feel that it's, or think that it's the kind of Hollywood connection where you're just so attracted to this person where you just want to rip the pants off and so on. And yes, it might be an element of that too, but it is that exactly that you are in that space with the other person and you are connecting not just on the attraction level, but on a much deeper, much more sensitive level, where you are sharing life experiences. And this actually is very similar to how I felt with my husband when I met him. We had, I think, like a 9-hour date when we were talking. And it was just like time just passes and you are having these conversations, and it just feels, oh my God, it just feels easy and natural. And there's no need to worry because the other person feels like they're on the same page with you.
Absolutely. It's that bandwidth, kind of noticing that you're resonating. Often that is very linked to values as well, that we are parts of me meeting parts of them. They're showing up in a way that feels valuable. That if I am someone who prides myself in being kind, generous, attentive, caring, whatever it might be, and I'm meeting someone who is similar, then we think, actually, they're really kind and caring and they're listening to me. And that matters to me. Whereas if I was, say, my main values were to be adventurous, to be thrill seeking, to be living life to its fullest, then maybe I would have had a very different date. Or maybe I would have gone with someone who was much more adventurous and we were exploring the world together. Again, it would have been a very different connection. But it's not about what's right or wrong. It's not about whose values is right or wrong. It's actually feeling that you have enough of an overlap with them and their values that you feel the overlap is enough to carry any of the discrepancies. So there's enough things to bind us together. That means I have plenty of patience and tolerance for the things where we are different. You don't need to be compatible on all points. You need to have compassion as a way to overbridge the ways you are incompatible. So that's really important to acknowledge that we're not looking for someone who you are exactly the same as. It's not like always being completely alike in your values, your interests, your likes and dislikes, because then you'd be dating yourself. And I personally would not want to be dating myself. I wouldn't be married to myself.
No.
The fact that you can also bring similarities and differences, you can bring differences to the table, and that can give you a sense of richness, can complement your strengths. But we need compassion for when your weaknesses clash, when you are different, and when you are different interests and different dislikes. So that's one of the things I felt were really key in the beginning of this connection with this person, that I felt that there was an understanding and a patience around the ways where we were different. We are not the same kind of person. We are into very different things, but we had an underlying, genuine mutual respect for each other. And that mutual respect, kindness, friendship, all of those things are, I think, the building blocks in a lasting connection.
Yeah. And were you interested in relationships prior to that, or has that grown since you met your husband, and like building your own relationship, or how has that sort of your focus on relationship, how has that grown?
I think that's grown organically bit by bit. I've always been interested in relationships. I've been what I refer to as a serial monogamist. I like close, deep, long-term relationships. I've done more of those than I've done like quick, short dating experiences. I like getting to know someone really intimately, deeply. But it was when we were planning our weddings, paying attention to and noticing a lot of the pressures around wedding planning. That's when I really thought, I need to write a book about this, because kind of the, pardon the pun, but marrying together my interest around perfectionism with the interest around couples relationships. And then you're seeing the whole narrative around it, the perfect wedding narrative, which is all the pressures on this one day, when beyond the perfect wedding day lies a good enough marriage. That's how I usually say it. All that pressure on that one day to be perfect. But then you wake up to the same person you were with beforehand. In modern day society, most of us already have been together with a partner and known them intimately for a long time. Is different to how it was a long time ago. Now we're more likely to already be cohabiting. We're more likely to have already been physically intimate with each other. We're more likely to share things together. We may have even bought property together. There's a lot of ties and connections made now that where we think, actually, that one day, that one very expensive party day, when I was planning that, I got drawn into these pressures as well. I noticed the stress in myself. I witnessed how much pressure there was to do everything perfectly. It got to the point where Perfect Wedding magazine featured my wedding because I made so much by myself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what have I done to myself? But we were trying to bootstrap it. So I was making lots of things myself because it was cheaper. But then I made it all look like a vintage kind of thrifty bride. But it made me really reflect on some of the research around this. And it still took a few more years before the book came to fruition. So I got married in 2014 and the book came out in 2021. So that was 7 years before it actually came out. But I thought about it a lot. I went and got some specialist couples training in 2014. And it has really helped me navigate the throes of marriage and to have these skills myself. And it really made me reflect on the pressures to be perfect. I don't know if you're aware of a piece of research around the total spend on your wedding, total spend on your wedding rock, the diamond, the size of the diamond. There's a relationship between how much you spend on the wedding, an inverse relationship, and the risk of that marriage falling apart. The more money you spend on your wedding day, the higher the risk it is that you're going to divorce.
That's very interesting. It really is.
It really is.
It's just a lot, perhaps, about values and what's important. And so what are maybe some of the difficulties that you've seen in your work that come alongside perfectionism, whether it's to do with relationships or then more on a more general level?
The couples who tend to come to my practice tend to be very high striving, busy people. So I would say that probably the biggest thing that causes disconnect in modern couples is busyness. We're more attached to our smartphones than we are to our partners. And there's some interesting research saying that people have more intimacy with their smartphones in bed, taking their smartphones to bed, than they do with their partners, because you get caught up in that vortex and that gives very sort of strong dopamine feelings. The dopamine is what we have in the early stages of dating, when everything feels exciting and I just feel a bit drunk in love. And I cover that in the book as well, of how we then move from those endorphins and dopamine kind of exhilarating feelings into settling into more of a safe, strong, deep commitment type of foundation of soothing love, companionative love. So when we then think about what kicks you get from doing stuff on your phone, you get dopamine kicks. And then next to you is your partner that you've been together for a few years, perhaps. And you're like, that's less exhilarating than this thing I'm just on my phone. So that is one of the things I'll teach to couples, like just leave the phone out of the bedroom. That's not just because of sex, but just don't have your phone in the bedroom, because it's more enticing to click on that than it is to touch your partner.
Absolutely. And we, of course, because we are programmed to automate our relationships too. So that person that we start to assume that they are this person instead of this interesting device that brings up all sorts of interesting facts and things like that. And where do we obviously go? We navigate something new and exciting, whereas we have this partner that we've known for quite a while, and then that's it, I suppose, that the wedge is there. And so what about then, and if we take it back to that, then when your relationship is more established. So what about then if you are dating, for example, and where do you think that perfectionism might then stop you on your tracks or in some ways hinder your process of finding the right person for you?
I think it can hinder it in two ways. One is how it can hinder you from getting deeper into the connection with that person. I'll cover that in a moment. And one is how you can end the connection prematurely. Right. So the first one is more about how you're holding yourself back, thinking I need to be a certain way. We talked about facades, holding up that image of who you want them to see you as, this sort of almost flawless perfection, because you want them to like you. There's nothing wrong with that. It's human to want to be liked and loved and appreciated. But the risk of that when you paint up a picture that isn't you is that they never really get to connect with you. It's less relatable. So there's an interesting piece of research where people were told to speak to a stranger in as a perfect way as possible, like really uphold this facade of being, you're really smashing it. You are perfect in any way, not showing any vulnerabilities, not showing any weaknesses, just being as flawless as you can. And then doing the same thing where you were holding a conversation with a stranger and you were told to show a bit more humanity, being a bit more imperfect.
Yeah.
And then they were viewing how likable you were rated when you were being more authentic versus when you were trying to have this facade of flawless. And lo and behold, it is likable to be a bit rough around the edges. Not to say that you are going to go on your first few dates and just be behaving badly. It's just letting them see who you are, letting them see authentically what you care about, even if that might be divisive, what you want from this situation. Whereas painting up a picture of someone you are not, that drives you further away from a connection with them. So that's the first kind of way where you're trying to be perfect, it stops connection. So if a mantra to hold in mind is connection over perfection. So connection comes from imperfection, vulnerability, authenticity. Another way I see it falling apart is when people have that perfectionism directed outwardly when they have extremely high standards, not only for themselves, but also for who needs to fit in that slot, who's going to be good enough. And because we have these unrealistic standards today in modern society of what love and romance and affection is supposed to look like, including intimacy, physical intimacy, it can be really easy to think someone comes into the slot and you try them on for size and think that's not good enough because it doesn't look like the Hollywood love that you mentioned. There's a lot of these rom-coms that have a lot to answer for, like Jerry Maguire and these kind of films. They're just not realistically how love looks. I sometimes think of that. Whoever has seen a sex scene when someone says, I need to go to the toilet? It never happens, right? Or they're going to go, I'm a little bit sweaty. It all goes from 0 to 100 in a matter of seconds, which we know that female libido doesn't look like that. So if you have unrealistic standards and pressures for yourself as well as for your prospective partner, you may end up feeling disappointed. High expectation leads to falling from grace into disappointment. And you might then discard that person prematurely. You might get rid of them thinking, they're not the right person for me. They're not the perfect match for me. And you may end up running the risk of being very lonely. So that said, it doesn't mean that we should just take anyone and be like, oh, I'll settle for whatever because I don't want to be alone. I don't mean that. I just mean because it's better to be alone and strong and safe and confident in that than to be with someone who's not good for you. I'm not talking about accepting bad behavior for the sake of not being lonely, not letting people go on the first mistake. Being aware that we are all humans who are fallible and more likely to make mistakes than not. So having excessively high standards for the person you're looking for is going to leave you feeling disappointed because then nobody will measure up.
Absolutely. That is so true. That is so true. So what do people know from research and from clinical experience? Why do some of us develop this, are us striving for perfectionism? And what are the sort of internal dialogues that people have or women have?
I guess it's really worth noting that it's nothing when we're striving for excellence, but striving for perfection is the problematic bit. So striving for excellence might mean that you encourage yourself to do well, you have maybe ambitious goals, you have things you want to achieve career-wise, or you pride yourself in being a particular kind of person, you want to hold yourself up to that standard. That's fine because there still be an excellent standard in some areas. If you also tolerate that there will be some areas you just maybe even rubbish at. Like I have things that I'm really not good at and I have things that I excel at. We all have that because we are human beings, so we will have strengths and weaknesses. Striving for perfection means you're going for something that's unattainable. And then the inner dialogue that can then come online is that when you don't reach that unattainable goal you've set for yourself, you will feel like a failure. You will trigger failure stories. They will trigger thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I failed, I should be ashamed of myself. And it can trigger fear around being judged and criticized by others, perhaps because you have had experience growing up, perhaps in your formative years, where you were criticized and judged by others. So perfectionism may have been something you developed as a kind of suit of armor, a shield, something to protect you from rejection and humiliation. So perfectionism can be something that we use as a safety-seeking measure. I can then feel like I can avoid any criticism, any judgment, any failure if I constantly strive to do everything just right. And that can be both in love, at work, anything. The way you clean your house. So perfectionism can be all pervasive in all domains of your life, or it can show up in just the one or two. It might be that you are really worried about not being good enough and perfect in intimate relationships, but your house is a tip and you don't care. So it can be different areas. But these unrealistic standards will lead to an inner sort of critical self-talk that you will have. It's almost like an inner critical voice that tells you that you're not good enough. It can attack everything from your body image to how you are in bed to how you're performing at work. And it can be like an ongoing narrative, static on the radio, just like chattering away at you, saying mean things. And that is something that I see in a lot of high-striving, ambitious women, that a sense of not enoughness that has real pervasive impact on who they are when they're looking for a romantic partner as well.
And that, it sounds so exhausting, really exhausting, trying to be to that level, which is just out of reach in some ways, or just there somewhere. And how that then, if you are so focused on being that perfect person, how do you even have the time or space for someone else? Because that, like you said, that keeping up the appearances takes so much of your energy. And actually, when we connect with someone, the more grounded we are, the more our nervous system is regulated and everything, the more we can connect with someone else. But if we are in that mode of trying to reach something, whatever it is, and that totally so makes sense how that stops the connection from someone else. And maybe if you're wondering now, if someone's wondering, why is it that I haven't found that right person? Because I do the exercise, the diet, I'm all of this. Then maybe it's about asking, okay, is that serving you? Or maybe you need to do something about it. And what could someone then do? What do you do with if you find yourself realizing that you are striving for perfection all the time and it is taking your energy, and maybe it's even stopping you from dating because you don't have time for it, or you tell yourself that you don't have time for it?
There's a lot of questions involved in that one. I think it's what do you do about perfectionism? What do you do about perfectionism stopping you from love? And I guess the answer to that, the antidote to perfectionism, is compassion in my book. So this is what I wrote in my actual book about how you develop love and compassion for yourself and your partner. But it's equally valid even if you're not in a relationship. Maybe there are patterns that your brain is replicating, because the brain likes familiarity. It would look for things that feel like it's similar to what you've experienced before. So if you have a sense of not enoughness, if you have a sense of I'm a failure, or I'm not good enough, or you have pressures on yourself, or you feel moments of shame, then you're more likely to also seek out relationships that replicate those feelings. So if through no fault of your own, you've grown up in a household, or you've witnessed relationships between your parents perhaps that weren't healthy and weren't happy, unfortunately, you are more likely to seek out those kind of experiences. Not because you're looking to self-flagellate or anything. It's just that the brain wants to find patterns that match what you've already experienced before. Taking a moment, perhaps in coaching or therapy, to think about how these patterns have shown up. If you have serial patterns of former relationships where you have been with people who maybe didn't treat you well enough, and you have this not enough story or a failure story, that is worth addressing that in therapy or coaching, so that you can prepare yourself for your next relationship, knowing that when you are more compassionate with yourself, you're able to stand up for yourself. You have the courage to set a boundary, to say no to things you don't want. You have the courage to show parts of you, even the parts you're not proud of, because that is what also forms connection, is showing those vulnerabilities. And when you develop kindness and compassion for yourself, you're more able to also dare to receive compassion flowing in, kindness and compassion from someone else, which was a big part of my journey. I had to really work hard on that when I met my husband to be. Receiving all the kindness that he had to give for me, I wasn't quite used to it. So we then have to look out for those patterns so we don't run the risk of throwing away a relationship where someone is kind and caring towards you because you're not used to it. This is something that happens a lot, where we kind of look at the classic bad boy narrative. Like, why would you be so enticed by this bad boy who treats you badly when you've got another guy in front of you and you put him in the friend zone? This is something that a lot of women do. I'm just not into him. I'm not romantically interested. No, because it's that danger, the darkness, the bad bits feel more enticing, but they're never going to give you lasting connections. Think about, what do you want? Are you after a short-lived connection? Well, then go for the bad boy. He's probably going to hurt you. So if you want a lasting connection, we have to think about actually what you said about the nervous system and regulating ourselves. We need to feel safe enough to play. Connection means we feel safe and calm and connected. So that means that our soothing system, our parasympathetic nervous system, is activated, where we feel a sense of calm and connection, sense of rest and digest. All of that gives us a sense of feeling close, gives us a sense of oxytocin, or the cuddle hormone, hormone. All of that means that we're then able to be close and calmly connected with someone, so we can step into the more exciting, exhilarating systems of our brain as well, our drive systems, which gives you dopamine kicks, that gives you joy, vitality, excitement, exhilaration, all of these kind of higher emotions. There are fleeting and don't last very long, but they come because you feel safe enough to play with this person. When you are entering a relationship driven by fear, like you said, I'm doing all the diets, doing all the exercise, like trying to self-flagellate yourself into shape so someone will pick you, then you are entering into connections with people based on threat.
Yes.
If I don't look good enough, they will reject me. If I don't lose 5 pounds, maybe no one will pick me up. So you're entering into these connections not with vitality and joy, but of fear of being rejected, fear of being abandoned. And that is never going to feel safe to play.
Like, that is so true. Absolutely. What's the sort of, so it's really, I guess, there's challenging your own narratives. And then I suppose, how do you let in the early stages the other person when you are tentatively starting to build something, when, just how do you let your guard down a little bit if you've always been the one who has always got guarded? So how do you then start to, and that's for you, like what you said about allowing this kindness and caring to come in? So how can you do it? How can you learn? How can you train yourself, I suppose, in some ways?
I like to start in the place which is about, it's a bit meta, the place of which is about how hard it is to be compassionate to yourself. So when people think, oh, I need to be compassionate to myself and I really struggle with this, I ask them to start with that point, to be compassionate about how hard it is to be compassionate. So if you were to say, write a compassionate letter to yourself about how hard it is to sit down and write this freaking letter. And that's a good point to start by saying, no wonder this is really tricky for me. Perhaps because this wasn't modeled to me. My parents didn't show me how to be compassionate towards myself and be kind to myself. Or my parents only gave me encouragement and reward when I achieved something, or whatever it might be in your story. So starting at that point saying, no wonder that I find this tricky. No wonder that I struggle to receive kindness and compassion in relationships, because I've had relationship A, B, and C where that wasn't happening. It might have been the relationships to your parents. It might have been relationships to previous partners. Perhaps you have been hurt, deceived, cheated on, left, abandoned. Perhaps you have all of these tricky experiences. And compassion is that then reality check saying, no wonder that I struggle to do these things. No wonder I struggle to let my guard down and trust someone and feel safe with them, because I've been this, this, and this. And just outlining that to yourself repeatedly, saying, it's not my fault that I find this really tricky because of what's happened to me. That means that you are not pitying yourself. You're not letting yourself off the hook, or, oh, never mind, I can act whatever way I want because this has happened to me. It's not my fault. A way of saying that to yourself is not passive surrendering. It's not being permissive with yourself. It's a strong accountability. And it's saying with kindness, saying, this happened to me. So understandably, I will struggle to be vulnerable in this new relationship because when I was vulnerable last time, he or she laughed at me. I felt ridiculed and humiliated. So no wonder that I will struggle to let my guard down again. And you can do exactly that then. You can label that and name that to your prospective new partner by saying, actually, this is really hard for me. I would like to share something with you. But when I did last time, my ex-partner laughed at me. So I'm really anxious about sharing this with you, but I would like to let you in. Hey, you just listen. Right? You don't have to say anything. You don't have to fix it. It's a part of me that I would like you to know about. And that's really almost like preempting and setting the scene for how we need that kindness and compassion to flow back in. And that's, to me, is communication. That is saying, this is what my need is in this moment. This is what I need you to do. Because that leaves them not having to guess, and it leaves them more able to sit with the emotion that you bring them rather than jumping into fixing mode, which so many, especially male partners, wants to do. So then you're saying almost like a heads up, this is what I want to share, and it's hard for me. So that's a really good example of compassion in action in a new relationship, of how you can start to lower your guard and to say, just caveat it by saying, I'm anxious about this. I'm worried that you're going to do the same thing that's happened to me before. That gives them not only the heads up, but it also gives them a request of what you want from them. And also, if they then do the same thing that's happened to you before, then you already know. This is not a relationship where you can feel safe. It's almost like it's a test.
Absolutely.
Not that we should
No.
test partners, but
No.
it's like putting some feelers out. Is this going to carry me? Is this strong enough to carry me? And then obviously making sure that you do the same for your prospective partner too. If they are asking these things of you, letting compassion flow out from you to them. So it's worth knowing that there are 3 flows to compassion. 1 from you to other people, including your prospective partners. From them to you receiving that flow of kindness coming in. And 1 from you to you, self-compassion.
Absolutely. And I guess that is like when you have those conversations, it is like you're giving a little bit of a manual of how you want to be in the relationship. And where if they respond positively and they do what you're asking them, that's positive, that's a tick. And then if they are not, if they're repeating or patterns or something like that's all information for you. Is this the person that you want to really be spending more time with, or is this relationship potentially then heading towards something old? Is something old being repeated here?
Yeah, absolutely. If you meet someone who's so arrogant that they won't read the IKEA manual, you know what's going to happen if you try to build IKEA furniture without really looking at the picture. And I guess that's a good sort of, like you said, it's not test, it's information is really good word. It gives you key information. Will they take the time, effort, the investment into hearing what is your manual, what buttons do they push in what order? If they have no interest in that to me is a real red if that's not going to be a lasting connection.
Absolutely. It has been so wonderful to have this conversation with you. And is there anything else that you would like to say, Michaela, now at the end, really, a piece of advice or something really for our listeners that they can take away when they are going out there and they want to really meet that significant person in their life, and what could help them to take the next step forward really on their journey?
I'll share something that I said once on a bus to a retreat in Thailand after I was really jet lagged, and I had a long conversation about love, connection, relationships with a fellow psychologist. And she asked me, so what is love? What is the answer? What is the thing about connection? And obviously I don't have the answers to what is love completely. But I told her, basically, the answer to this, basically, if you can own your own stuff, and if you can tolerate your partner's stuff, you got a pretty good start.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have that accountability with kindness, with compassion, learning towards yourself, looking in the mirror, owning that stuff, owning that you have dark sides and weaknesses that you're not proud of, if you can own those things with kindness, and if you can give your partner the time of day, allow them to make mistakes, allow them to be human too, asking for your needs to be met, setting boundaries, you got a really good start for a lasting connection. Whereas if you're aiming for perfection, you will never have a lasting connection.
Yeah.
So that's where I want to leave you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That is so lovely. That is such a lovely way to put it, really. Thank you for that. And of course, so could you tell me a little bit about where can people find more about you or your offerings and so on?
Sure. So I've got my book called The Lasting Connection we've talked about. You can find it on all the major booksellers or my website, thethomasconnection.co.uk, where you can drop me a message if you want to have a free consultation. One of the most powerful ways I help people is through my online course, The Compassionate Couple, where you go through brain training basically with your partner. You do relationship skills building by learning and teaching each of you to become more compassionate to yourselves as well as the other person. So that's The Compassionate Couple, which you can also find on my website. I also do one-to-one and coaching and therapy for high-striving individuals as well in my flagship group coaching program, Burn Bright. So you can find all of that information on my website or on my Instagram under The Thomas Connection. And I'm happy to DM and chat with anyone who wants to have a bit more support.
Thank you. And we'll put all of those details in the show notes so it's easy for anyone to access it. Thank you so much. And it's been wonderful to have this conversation with you again, Michaela.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you learned something new, please go and leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform, because that way more women like you can hear this message and benefit from all the resources and all the information that we share here on this How to Love Successfully podcast. And also, I would like to remind you that if you are interested in taking your dating really to the next level and learn how to get unstuck from where you are right now, every month I offer a few free 30-minute dating clinic consultations. I'll be asking you detailed questions about your dating situation and help you to get unstuck. And you will walk away with a clear plan on how to meet your special person. You can go and book the consultations now by following the link in the show notes. And please remember to give yourself the love you're seeking first, and that way you will attract the love you want. Bye for now.